Evening. I'd like to welcome you and call to order the March 10th Port Orchard City Council regular meeting. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. We're all here, and except for staff, most are home for precautionary reasons. About half the court staff has got colds or some sort of flu, but hopefully not the bad kind of flu. So we're being careful, and a couple folks will join us electronically later when we test the Zoom app. So with that, we are to the agenda. Is there any additions or subtractions or modifications to this evening's agenda? Councilmember Rosapepe.
Mayor, I'd recommend that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
You recommend or you make a motion?
Make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
It's the first time I've done this one.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We are to our citizen comment period. See some gentlemen from the fire department and a guest with them too, but I don't believe they're here for the presentation, so I will close the first citizen comment period. We are to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
A second by Councilmember Cacciardi. The only thing I would just comment on here is the addition to the code for our police department. Our prior code was really quite lacking other in the powers that you authorize as the council for the police department. So hats off to Charlie and the chief. They've created this code. We had a policy for the mayor hiring a police chief and the council approving that hiring, but beyond that, our code was pretty light. So this is a much better addition to our code. And now that we're a code city, these type of things are important. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion of the consent agenda items? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We are all the way to our presentation. Chief Wright.
Well, thank you for having me tonight here. We always like to start off some things that concern our fire district with, all the people from our community that have leadership positions, and certainly reporting to the city council here is important on that list. As Mayor said, my name's Steve Wright. I'm the fire chief for the fire district here that really covers all of the south end of the county. I think the board's aware that outside of the city limits, the rest of South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, just as the rest of the school district is out there. And we provide the services for both fire and medical in the city. We, as an agency, have a ballot measure that we're going to have on the August 4th ballot this next election. And I wanted to start by informing the city council of that, since parts of it does impact the city, and hopefully in the long run will improve our services that we deliver across the entire South Kitsap community. I have a certain amount of things I'd like to cover. I'm not sure if you're going to end up giving me a red light, but let me know when I'm tallying.
You don't have a light.
All right, well, tallying. Oh, can I turn it off? Okay. So back in 2014, when I became fire chief, we were recovering from the recession. We had a lot of challenges at the fire district, and we went through some tough times. We reduced some force. We laid off 12 firefighters. We closed some fire stations. We kind of repurposed the district to kind of get it back on its feet. And at that time, we also looked at our broad base of needs, which we had some substantial ones, and said, okay, this is a pretty heavy lift for a community here in South Kitsap. We need to take a good look at this and figure out how to start moving some of these heavy lifts forward, which we formed up a citizens group committee. Mayor was actually on it at that time. And we looked at all the needs, and the district had some heavy needs in the form of our apparatus, our fire equipment that we deliver our services with, the equipment we have, and then also our facilities. If you combine those all together, it was a little daunting. Having watched what the school district's gone through and the other challenges that this community has with passing large measures, at that time we decided to divide up our problem into smaller bites and bring forward our most pressing need, which at that time you'll probably remember me talking about. Our most critical need was the apparatus and equipment, because the reality is we deliver our services by going to people. We do house calls, if you will, and we do that with fire engines, water tenders, medic units, the ones you see orbiting around our community all day long, every day, with our busy schedule. And so that was a bond measure that we put together, presented to the citizens back in 2015. We kept it as small as possible to meet our needs, and that was twofold. One was to keep the costs down so the citizens didn't get a sticker shock. We ran that at 15 cents per thousand of assessed valuation. And then we also kept it short. We kept it as a 5-year bond measure. And a lot of people question me on that, but the intent of that short time frame was to get back to today, because we knew 5 years would go by and it would allow us to come back to the citizens after demonstrating good service for 5 years, meeting the things we said we were going to do, meeting our promises we made with the bond, replacing the equipment, purchasing everything, and watching that bond get paid off, which we are at that stage, because at the end of this year, that bond measure's paid off. The intent of the August election is to have us back before the voters. Can't use the word renewing a bond, but basically a bond that will replace the one that's being paid off to deal with our second half of our issue, which was a little bit bigger issue. It's the facilities. Certainly the council here understands the cost of doing things when you start figuring in public works project, prevailing wages, all the other impacts that are out there. Same deals apply with building fire stations. And but the process was to get a yes from the community, let them see that we can be trusted with that, move us to today, where we're back now to ask them about a bond measure to replace 3 fire stations, and also to upgrade our headquarters campus of the headquarters area with our admin building, our fleet and facility maintenance area, some warehousing and things like that, all up at our campus there. Also on that measure will be to seismically upgrade the existing stations that are still in the long-range plan, to bring them up to the most current code with earthquake retrofitting and things of that nature. So we've packaged this measure up with those as the main topics there. It's a much heavier lift than the $5 million bond last time for the apparatus. This package comes in at about $39.5 million. And of course, over facilities, you bring those over longer term. So 20 years is the standard issue for bond measures for facilities. So this one packages out as a 20-year bond measure, and it's going to cost the citizens about 17 cents. Keeping in mind right now they're paying about 13 on the current bond measure, so the increase is going to be between 4 and 5 cents per thousand. This group understands that if your house is appraised at $400,000, this is a tax increase of somewhere around $20 a year for the average citizen in South Kitsap. What this does for us, though, is it really allows us to get the fire stations where we need them to be based on all the rules and growth that we've seen in the last 75 years since we were developed as a fire district. Some of our fire stations are in the wrong locations. A lot of them are old, aging little buildings that were really designed as a shed for volunteers to come and pick up the apparatus and go on the call when it happened. And with our increased call volume, our career staffing in different places, we've just sort of outgrown some of our needs. So the 3 fire stations will be moved around the South Kitsap area where our future is projected to be for response and for the growth. One of them is in the city of Port Orchard, sort of across the street from McCormick Woods entrance on Old Clifton Road, right next to the park. And I think the board recognizes that that piece was given to the fire district for this purpose, and that will be one of the locations. Another one would be sort of between our headquarters station in Manchester at Woods Road and Mile Hill, and then one would be south a little bit near Mullinex and Highway 16. Keeping in mind that our avenues of travel and all those pieces are part of how we decide locations. But the growth is coming. This is allowing us to really project the fire district out 30 to 50 years into the future. And this bond measure, you know, as much as it still is talking about taxes, we're trying to keep it at a piece that doesn't provide that sticker shock. And so that concept of for the $400,000 house, it's about a $20 change from what we've been paying the last 5 years is our message we're doing there. And so that'll be on the ballot, obviously come out mid-July with voting on August 4th. And so I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions or, you know, provide any more information.
Do you have the same percentage requirements that the school does?
Yes, unfortunately, in this application, it's a bond measure, and it still is a supermajority, which we all understand that is a little bit heavier lift than the basic simple majority, and most of these decisions are made in a very narrow window. We have a significant population base that supports us because we're out there 10,000 times a year providing a pretty broad-based service. Certain people are just going to say no because they're going to say no, and we're really dealing with a very small group, and that's the whole concept of getting this information out there, letting them know that, you know, we're not trying to run this bill to be something that's super heavy on the pocketbook, but the reality is the need is here today. A project like this will take 3-4 years to complete, and, you know, if we do get a no, that we lose that 13 cents that they're paying now. So the next time we'll be back, it will be for a 17-cent increase. And so hopefully we'll get it through even with that supermajority.
Other questions for Chief Wright? Chief, I really appreciate you coming and sharing this with us. Since I have you here and I see one of your, Dusty Wiley, your fire commissioners, and I have my policy board here, I know that the chief and I have had some preliminary discussions about our Navigator program, and I know we've heard from our police department how important it is to us, and I've heard similar stories from the fire service, and I know we put some additional dollars to have, make sure we had Melissa here in Port Orchard, and we didn't lose her, to another community. My goal is to, in our next budget process, is to bring forward a plan where potentially the fire district and Port Orchard share in having Melissa here full-time and serving the South Kitsap community and not being shared with us in Bremerton. So just continuing to, water that seed. And we have an ILA with the fire district right now, and we pay the fire district currently about a little over $50,000 for inspection service, and possibly we've had some conversation too about potentially amending that ILA. Melissa's going to cost about a little over $100,000. It might make sense just to not trade checks if the expenses are similar. So,
and certainly the mayor and Matt Brown, the police chief, we've been talking about this, and this is a program that is working. It is helping, and just as your police officers are being loaded with a certain amount of these types of responses, my EMTs and firefighters are on the other end of that. And granted, we cover the entire south end, but so much of this is based closer to the urban core. And South Kitsap Fire and Rescue definitely sees the value, and also is in that idea of committing the budget to at least take a shot at this, because we believe that it is time to try something that might help with this problem in our community. It's ongoing, and it is a burden on our existing services.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief. All right, we have an executive session planned. It's really for the amendment number 4 to the purchase and sale agreement. If you want to have an executive session, there was one amendment that council member, it's on the second page.
Thank you.
And it's your call whether you're comfortable with what was put in your packet, or you want to chat about it a little bit before you take action. And the edit, council member Ashby pointed out, it was a good one.
I believe that the amendment that was in our packet mirrored very closely the discussion we had at the work study. So I'm fine without doing an executive session.
I am as well.
Okay, if that's the direction, then we'll skip the executive session and jump right into our business items. The first of which is the approval of amendment number 4 to contract number 053-18 with Waterman Investment Partners LLC for the 640 Bay Street purchase and sale agreement. And I'll lead this discussion. In summary,
Mayor?
and yes, sir.
If I may interrupt you, I just want to announce, not that I believe there's a conflict, and I did have a discussion with the city attorney prior to this meeting, but just to make sure it's clear, the attorney that's representing the purchaser, Ron Templeton, happens to be the attorney for Kitsap Transit. He doesn't do anything for me personally, but I just wanted to make sure that was out on the table. So if there aren't any objections, I'll sit. If anybody has an objection with me here, I'll gladly step aside, but the attorney seemed comfortable with.
Okay. Does anybody have any concerns or objections, Mr. Clausen, for participating in this? Okay, I'll proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. So, in July 2018, the city and Waterman Investment Partners LLC entered into a purchase and sale agreement with the city for the purchase property located at 640 Bay Street. Two addenda to the agreement have been previously approved to extend the closing date to December 31st, 2019. And on December 17th, 2019, a third addendum was approved to extend the closing date to March 31st, 2020. During the February 18th, 2020 work study sessions, discussions were held regarding the Public Facilities District funding sources, the original intent of the agreement, whether some minor changes could be made to the contract, and upcoming expiration date of the contract. Staff made changes to the agreement based on council's comments. With that, recommends approval of addendum number 4 to the real estate purchase and sales agreement for the city's property at 640 Bay Street. So additionally add, we've made this for 2 years, as you directed us to. They need a counter complete application to close. So they have to submit an application, and this agreement allows them, since we'll still own the property, to submit that application. And as the red line version indicates, they need to, we have to have this property appraised within 90 days of closing. That it will be our responsibility to procure that appraisal and pay for that appraisal. And then the buyer will pay us at least what we've previously appraised it for, and likely the higher amount of the new appraisal amount when that appraisal is done. So that's, and they must in that application be either permitting parking, commercial building, or residential building, one of those 3 components, and it must include our property in that first application. Councilmember Cacciardi?
Before we make a motion, I just have a quick question on the title of the document that we just received. It says Addendum 2, number 42, and the motion really just talks about approving Addendum number 4. So is this an amendment to the amendment
I think
number
this-
4?
I think
or is
this
that just
is-
a Scrivener's error?
So on the
I think
front
it's a
of
Scrivener's error, so it should say addendum number 4, 2.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know if
you
this
caught the
was
double
because of the
2.
red line, if we were amending.
yeah.
Right, no,
Right,
no,
that's-
thank you.
So catch that right after the word addendum, that first 2 needs to be struck, Brandy.
And Mayor, I wanted to point out in my discussions about the map that was to be attached, we had intended to remove the table that had the dimensions, and the way that it's presented here, it's already kind of cropped and not fully clear, but if we could also just X out the table, because we weren't binding them to any square footages in this table because the exact dimensions would change. We really only wanted the concept map in there, and the way that this file came to us, they were combined into one slide and we didn't separate them. But
Printed version, but it is in the electronic version. I'm confident of it. There it is. So when we take this to title, we want, as Nick said, this is for a reference only. It's not, we're not trying to bind them to those numbers that are on the right side of the page. Yes, Councilor Chardy?
I guess for discussion purposes, I move to approve addendum number 4 to the real estate purchase and sale agreement for the city's property at 640 Bay Street.
Second.
By Councilmember Clausen. Other discussion or questions? Councilmember Rosa Pepe.
I'm sure I missed it someplace, but I thought we had a discussion about that dirt had to be actually turned by, within a certain period of time. And that was, I believe, an interest of ours to make sure the project moved forward. Did I miss that, or?
You know, we had a number of discussions, and it was, that may have fallen off in this process just to keep there was also a desire to simplify this agreement. We had a very complex agreement before. I don't think they're gonna spend the money on engineering and design and permitting this and not break ground and build it. I think we're,
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that, but we had a timetable, this thing would not go
and this,
perpetual into the future.
Yeah.
And we were not focused on, we were willing to be phased it in, so, it wasn't, some master project all at once. But I just want to make sure that that they're truly partners with us trying to get this off the dime, because it's been a while since 640's been on the table. That's my only concern.
and I hear you, and the agreement does give a 2-year window for them to appraise it, close on it, and permit, so they're gonna have to pay significant permit fees, and the impact fees are due at that point, I believe also, aren't they, Nick?
The impact fees are due at the time of building permit, at least for the traffic and school impact fees. But I would just point out that as the owner of the property, I don't know that we want them moving dirt before they've closed. I think that the commitment of actually buying submitting the permits, it's a huge commitment. It's gonna be well over $100,000 in engineering fees and application fees to get to that point. And that, I think, shows a pretty firm commitment to move forward on the project.
And I have a couple items I want to talk about, but in response to your concern is and I believe it was 30 months was the time frame that was in the original agreement. That was when we thought it was going to have closed in 6 months, and we were going to enter into a development agreement, and I don't believe we had the permitting process required. And then they would have 30 months during this development agreement to get started. And we've been more lenient than that by extending this out 2 years, because it's already been 18 months. So requiring them to come forward with substantially complete application for the building permits, I think covers our concerns. Would be my take on that.
Thank you.
One of the questions I had, because I know that this purchase and sale agreement is with Waterman LLC, but at the original presentation, back in July of 18, and again at our work study in February, additional partners were mentioned in doing the complete program. And through all of this, we don't have any commitment from the other partners. So we're selling to Waterman, and they can, as I understand it, change who they're doing business with. So my question is it important to us that we make reference at all to those original partners that were brought in for the presentation? Because I believe a part of our confidence in the project was some of the people that were involved with moving it forward.
So in response to that, Waterman Steve Seago, who is Waterman, has been assembling the properties. I'm confident that the bank is going to locate their headquarters downtown, and I'm hopeful, Waterman is assembling property, and I'm hopeful that it's gonna be our local developer, Sound West Group, that comes forward and builds the residential part.
Who they brought in as I remember, was Steve Rice was here, Robbie Baglio was here, and Sound West Group was here.
I think the project scope has probably grown beyond, I don't want to speak to BJC Group, which is Robert Baglio's company. It's probably grown beyond that scale, and I believe Steve Rice is still engaged with those folks, but so are larger firms like GGLO did some of this.
I was just
master
bringing
planning.
that to council's attention
Yeah.
to see if that was important to anyone, or if it makes any difference at all.
I'm hopeful that it's going to be a local builder, but I'm personally more concerned that we retain the bank's headquarters. Whatever piece of this moves forward first, I think is going to create the momentum that the other phases of it also come together. And which happens first, sometimes changes weekly.
Yeah, I mean, I could argue that I'm more comfortable with having One Soul LLC involved. I mean, you add more complexities to this and other people that are, maybe signing on for liability, and who knows what's going to change, right? This project's already changed so much, so the GC could change, the engineer could change. I think it simplifies it, and I'm more comfortable dealing with one entity, to be honest with you.
And some performance requirements, which we've identified. Good question. Councilmember Diener?
I just want to say I'm comfortable with Waterman as well. We were given this revised version. It does reference Exhibit C, which is that.
Yes, and which it's in your
Yeah,
electronic package. That is the same exhibit.
yes,
The only change from the online version to this is what was in,
okay,
which is the 2.2, the red line,
90 days.
the 90 days. Exhibit to go with it. And what I'm hearing is the exhibit we want to X out, there we go.
Yeah, it'll look like this.
Charlotte's already done it. That's what
Just
it'll
be
look
the
like.
map.
Just be a map.
do we need to have an amendment then to reference at the table or?
I think we have stated it, that's the intent.
Okay, all right,
The motion can be as prepared.
Okay.
And we can include both of those, yeah.
okay, that's fine.
Other questions or comments? Okay, you'll be voting on amendment number 4 to contract number 053-18 with Waterman Investment Partners LLC for the 640 Bay Street purchase and sale agreement. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I'm going to pinch hit for Mr. Dorsey on the next couple here. So this item B is adoption of an ordinance authorizing a civil engineer 2 position. And so in summary, the current workload of the Public Works Engineering Department is increased significantly with the increase in volume of activity, development, and capital projects. The City Council and the Mayor has expressed a desire for the city to do more design work in-house. With the increase in workload, the desire to increase design within the city's Public Works Engineering Department, and the need to provide for organizational structure to support the growth of a full-time city engineer 2 position is required. It is critical to the efficiency of the Public Works Engineering Department and supports the direction of the organization. The individual will be responsible for aiding the engineers with development, review, and inspections, civil engineering designs, project management, construction, administration, and inspection of capital projects, GIS, and AutoCAD mapping. Recommendation is from staff is that the City Council adopt the ordinance as presented to approving. I didn't write this. The position and salary scale for the civil engineer 2 position in the Public Works Engineering Department. So, Councilmember Lucarelli?
I move to adopt an ordinance approving the position and salary scale for civil engineer 2 position in the Public Works Engineering Department thereon, as presented in Exhibit A.
Second it.
And a second by Councilmember Clausen. So if you recall, we hired Ian as an engineer in training, didn't have his license. So we didn't really have these logical steps. He's now gotten his license, and we feel that the creation of this job, he is more valuable now. And the only positions we had was the engineer in training and the assistant city engineer. Well, he doesn't have the experience that Chris have. We need another step, our job creation there in between there. There's been a bit of discussion between Ian and the engineering department and the finance department about this salary range. We've been conservative in this, and Ian has expressed that he thinks it should be more. So what we've assured him is we've done the best. We know we're being conservative, and I'm going to tell you in my mayor's report later. This week we're going to sign the contract for the salary survey, which is typically implemented with the next biennial budget. And with your permission, I would like to keep this conservative, because last thing I want to do is do the salary survey and we shot too high and now we froze Ian, okay? But I've assured him that I would come back to the city council if we're wrong and he's right, that we, ahead of everybody else, we would bring his position back to the city council to correct what we might have gotten wrong. I don't think we did, but I just wanted to work out an agreement. I felt we could appease Ian.
I think it's a good approach.
Yeah. So we wanted to be conservative. We are being, and we've got a process that will catch if we didn't get it right and made a mistake. So
Does he, because he has worked for us with a different title, but he does have years of service with the city, does he start this new job with his current seniority? Or does he start down here the first 6 months? Or does he go in to this after 2 or 3 years portion?
it won't be, he is now with us 2 years, going on 3 years. He won't start there. It's not uncommon. As we move people in, maybe, typically we want to do the 6 month. If we end up bringing him in at the 1 year, instead of getting a raise in 6 months, he will get it in 1 year. So are you following? He'll forego the 6 month raise. It would bump it a year. But our goal is, Mark and Ian wanted to negotiate that too when we were doing the salary range. They said, time out, we don't even have a job yet to offer Ian. First step is, let's go get the salary range in this position approved, and then we'll sit down and discuss where to plug him in. But I can assure you, it won't be at the 2 or 3 year mark. It'll be at the 6 month and no more than a year. I'd like to see it at the 6 month, but that's the best I can answer. I'm trying not to negotiate from the dais.
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion and a second. Yes.
Okay, I guess the other thing that my comment would be is I would not want Ian to look for other employment for the want of the difference between that 6 months and that 2 years.
Okay. It is a dangerous precedent, though, if I start bringing people up. And many times when I bring someone in, try not to lay too many cards on the table here. When we bring somebody
That's fine,
in,
that's just,
Yeah.
my feeling is I don't want to lose a valuable employee for want of $1 or $2 an hour that,
yeah, I hear you. Mr. Clausen?
My only comment was, I very much appreciate what you're saying, Beck, but it's the mayor's job to deal with
Do that.
that, and if he's comfortable with this, I'm certainly not going to second guess him, so.
The bigger deal when I talked to Ian was, if we were wrong on the salary range, we would make it right as soon as we had better information. And I trust Debbie Lund and the work she's done. I don't think we are, but in the off chance that we are, I assured him, I would come back to the council.
Either
Well, I
way,
think
and
it's a good
attempt to make it
alternative
right.
that we're going to make an adjustment right away as soon as we have
Better information.
better information.
Yeah,
So,
from an outside party. That's right. Okay. Other questions on this matter? Okay, you'll be voting on, what are you voting on? Adoption of an ordinance authorizing a civil engineer 2 position. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. You are about 10 minutes late, Mr. Seago, and we did not approve item A. I'm sorry.
Multiple questions.
There was a lot of questions. No, it passed,
That's true.
it passed unanimously. Yes. That's all right. All right, we are to item C, approval of change order number 1 to contract number 029-20 with Arkin Inc. for the 2020 library leak repair. And once again, I'm playing Mr. Dorsey in tonight's meeting. So, in summary, on January 14th, 2020, the Port Orchard City Council approved contract number C019-20 with Arkin Inc. for the containment, air quality mitigation, and repair of one leaky area identified within the Port Orchard Library. Upon further investigation by the contractor, it was determined that 3 out of the 4 drain roof scuppers in those section of the library have also have leak damage in their respective surrounding areas. The degree of the unforeseen damage is outside of the original scope by Arkin, and staff would like to retain the continued services for containment and air quality filtration while updated repairs options are considered. Tonight's action is for the approval of change order number 1 to contract number C019-20 with Arkin Inc. for the amount of $14,068.85 to retain the existing containment and air filtration system through May 12th, 2020. Staff's recommendation is that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute change order number 1 to contract number C19-20 with Arkin Inc. For the amount of $14,068.85. Mr. Clausen?
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the mayor to execute change order number 1 to the contract number 019-20 with Arkin Inc. in an amount of $14,068.85.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Teener. I know if I was sitting in your shoes, so I went and asked this question earlier today, what was the original contract amount? And it was almost $9,000. This additional money gets us through to May with the same contractor. We got hopefully good news. Our new assistant city engineer actually went down to the site and looked at it. Everybody else that's looked at it was here. Oh my God. And Chris was like, it's not as bad as everybody's telling me. And he's got some solutions. And it was his idea to contain a bigger area, open up the other 2 areas ahead of going out to bid. And Chris is comfortable writing the bid spec. So that body of work and the engineering drawings that he's going to do in-house is going to save us about $20,000. So Chris is earning his keep already in the short time he's been with the city. So he's got a structural background and structural engineering background and was comfortable with what he saw down there. We won't know the full extent until we open up the 2 other areas that have, but we need to have this filtration and containment equipment down there during this whole process. So, questions for Mr. Dorsey? Or myself? All right, I never knew I would be playing engineer, and I shouldn't be. So with that, you'll be voting on the approval of change order number 1 to contract number 19-20 with Arkin Inc. for the 2020 library leak repair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to our last item of business, and thankfully Mr. Bond is in the audience, because I wouldn't take this on. So he is here to talk about the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Agenda. Mr. Bond.
Thank you. Pursuant to Comprehensive Plan Amendment Regulations in the Port Orchard Municipal Code, Section 20.04, I've compiled a recommended Comprehensive Plan Amendment docket based on a preliminary evaluation of the need, urgency, and appropriateness of the suggested amendments, as well as the staff and budget available to accommodate the public review process. for 2020, all comprehensive plan amendment applications were required to be completed and submitted to the DCD by 5 p.m. on January 31st, 2020, in order to be considered during this year's amendment process. The department initiated amendments for one set of text amendments and one set of map amendments consistent with Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 220.04050 sub 1. A text amendment application was also received from Geiger Road LLC, and a map amendment was received from Errol Dow. I've recommended that the city-initiated amendments in the Geiger Road LLC text amendments be included on the 2020 Comprehensive Plan agenda. The text amendments are as follows. There is a proposed amendment to Table 1 of the land use element, and I passed out a revised version of that table, the revised table, tonight. I won't get into the details other than to say that the correction was what previously said civic and open spaces now says public and community spaces. We just had the wrong terminology. It was inconsistent with other sections of our code. The next amendment to the utilities element, the sewer capital improvement plan list on table 7.2 and the water capital improvement list on also table 7.2. Actually, I think one of those is 7.1. Those have both been updated. The transportation element, we have updated the street standard classification map and are replacing that. We are also bringing forward a new secure transportation improvement program, which is something we do every year, and I believe that this will continue to be refined both through the Planning Commission process and in our new Transportation Committee as we move into our budget cycle this year. And finally, Appendix B is being updated. That's the end of the text amendments initiated by the city. The map amendments initiated by the city deal with some inconsistencies, and there is an attachment A that lists a handful of properties that currently have certain zoning that is inconsistent with what is in the comprehensive plan. And so we are just doing some cleanup to fix those discrepancies. And I will say that Councilmember Ashby did notice an error, and so we passed out a new attachment A that correctly lists the United Methodist Church on the second page, which is number 9, as being a public and community space designation in the comp plan. Previously, it had the incorrect designation listed on the attachment. The other text amendment that we received was from Geiger Road LLC, and this is a pretty insignificant amendment. It really, it has to do with our centers maps and how we drew the boundary. We actually split their parcel so that half of it was in the center and half of it was out of the center. Their concern was that the property tax abatement, which may become available on their property, that is only available per state law in designated urban centers. And because we're designating centers in our comp plan, he didn't want there to be any confusion on whether his property was a center or was not. We are not saying that we're going to add him to the tax abatement area. We're just simply clarifying that boundary to include his entire property. And finally, there was one map amendment we did not recommend for inclusion, and the explanation is included in the staff report. So staff recommends that the City Council vote to approve the 2020 Comp Plan Amendment Agenda pursuant to 20.04060 as presented, including the city-initiated text and map amendment and the Geiger Road LLC amendment.
Okay. Councilmember Ashby.
Yes, I move to approve the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Agenda pursuant to Port Orchard Municipal Code 20-4.060 as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second. Questions for Mr. Bond?
I just have a comment.
Okay.
One issue that came up in land use was on attachment A. There's some properties on Sydney, numbers 14 through, I believe, 17, that the comp plan designation would be changing to commercial from mixed medium density residential. And that initially alarmed me because I thought, oh my God, commercial. But I was assured that that didn't mean that a gas station could go in along Sydney on those properties. And that's the 700 block of Sydney.
What specifically would that zoning type allow, Mr. Bond?
So right now, the county has a building on the corner of, I think, is it Ada?
Yeah.
And then there is a church building. I think there's only one single-family house on the entire block, and so we would look at a commercial designation with business professional mixed use to follow. And so business professional mixed use allows both houses and offices and small scale commercial development, but gas stations, storage, those types of things are not allowed in that zone.
Frontage lots there along Sydney, which I believe 2 of them are county. It's a single-family dwelling, vacant lot, and a law office, I think.
And there's another residential, which is on Ada, behind the county.
Yes.
Yeah.
For Stansbury spot.
Other questions or comments? Okay. You'll be voting on the approval of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Agenda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion's approved. All right, we're going to, our world is changing. I've actually, the only positive, thing that's come out of the coronavirus is I haven't traveled to as many meetings. So my schedule has gotten a little lighter. And one of the tools that we used for one of my meetings on Friday was called Zoom. And I found it to be very easy to use. And so if you go to your email, if you could open up your email, I sent you an email earlier today. And I'm texting the police chief and Noah so that they can join us. And if Brandy launches it, click that.
After the meeting, can I talk to you for a second? Sure. Thanks.
And what we're gonna wanna do, other than a couple of you, to turn the volume down to nothing, otherwise we'll have all of these speakers.
Oh, how do you do that?
Down at the bottom, you can hit your thing that's,
This
looks like a
guy?
speaker. No, down here.
Oh,
It says you're off.
Easiest way
You're
to
off,
control your
right
volume is
there.
right here. This little
Oh,
top.
Okay, go to your focus
I had
box.
it on mute. I'm just putting it on mute. See, if you click it, you can put it on mute too by Xing it, which it is right now. See, now now you have speaker. Click on it. Yeah, just click there. We're gonna get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, so you gotta turn your volume down. There on the top edge. Left
Send
side,
you a
other way. You went all the way to the top.
test. Okay, so we go to the link.
Yeah, I believe so. I never
I
did
gotta
that.
find what I sent you guys.
Yep.
Here we go.
Show somebody else other than us.
So our TVs, unfortunately, aren't equipped with
You get to
sound,
show it,
but,
Randy, just by doing this.
and obviously, we won't be all sitting here together when we go to do this. Yeah, and I hope we don't have to do this, but, in the event that we have to resort to a remote meeting, I just wanted to test a tool. And you can see Noah there. There's Chief Brown.
Yes, where do you do that?
Yeah.
They're up on the top edge of your screen. At least he's on the top edge. Oh, you're not there yet. You're coming. And then I would, so join with video.
Oh, I have to join.
You have to join. And then you're gonna join with audio.
Still haven't found it?
Oh, there we are.
And maximize that. Oops, and join with audio. And maximize. And. Nope, that
How long
box
does it
there.
take to connect to the network?
So there,
That's nice.
you on CC Link?
Oh,
CC
no.
Link?
No.
CC Link is where
Okay.
you wanna be.
Randy.
Go.
Does it need a password?
I bet, well, mine was on.
Oh, she's got you a big screen.
Okay.
Steve
picked it
might
up.
have set you up.
Okay.
And he did, look at that.
Okay, good.
You're all ready, and then click on that link. And
It's
Jay's-
coming up.
Oh, cool.
Jay's thinking still.
That's okay. I haven't gotten the
You
email
can see
yet.
everybody else, and when
How'd
it,
you do that?
when it picks up your microphone, it jumps
To you.
to you.
okay.
There's a gallery view.
There. Yeah, join
You
with
might wanna
video.
maximize
God, my nose is.
Oh, okay.
that box,
Ah,
and then
there
it'll
we
go
go.
full screen.
You
Okay.
have to look for it. This is, I think it's
Join
down
with
here.
computer audio.
I'm not sure yet.
Hey, John's the only iPad in the room. So,
Sorry?
John's the only iPad in the room, and it even worked on his iPad.
That's a reason.
You know, you'd think the chief would be in uniform for a meeting like this.
Okay, so you can move people over.
If you don't like, Councilmember Kucharty showed up in his pajamas or didn't have his pajamas on, he could also,
Virtual background.
he has a different background.
You're right, the police chief looks a little casual.
So,
Yes, you do, he's right there.
so Robert, how's the public engaged?
They can't.
They can't.
You know, and what we're gonna need to do is Brandy will record, this is gonna be an emergency meeting. We need to pay the bills, we need to approve a contract, get some business done, because there's been some executive order from the governor's office or something that's happened that's caused us not to be able to meet.
Sure.
And I hope, there's
Oh, I
Nick
like
and
that
his
better.
phone, yeah. I see Nick's phone,
It's on her phone.
Click that
Yep.
guy.
and,
That's cool.
That's cool.
She just went where you could see everybody.
yeah, that's a, yeah, you can, there's all kinds of different features you can play with
And
there.
Nick's on his iPhone. That's
Yeah,
cool.
Nick's on his iPhone, that's right.
We can't
And you
see
can,
The chief,
Doing FaceTime?
you could, if,
He fell asleep.
but the
Gone.
chief
the
dropped
app is
off.
free, if you wanted to put it on your phone, there isn't anything that's gonna reside on it. And then, but then you would need the
Bright
code
spot out there.
There
You
it
just
that
think about
Brandy
it.
emailed, instead of just clicking on the link, you would need to enter the code. And that's what Mr. Clausen had to do. Good. Or did you, were able to go right through the link?
No, I just entered the meeting code.
You even
I
enter the
use
meeting
this
code, and that's how it would
other
work on your
meetings,
phone.
so.
So with that, let's, I thought we would do our committee reports, and Noah and the chief are gonna participate electronically, and this was just a test. Brandy's recording, so that we have that public record.
Someone just got dressed.
Thank you, chief.
Gonna go get a uniform on?
Yeah.
There we go. All right. We're ready to roll now. So with that, we're going to go to our committee reports. And the Finance Committee, I don't believe, has met. And they still need, if they could, this evening before we depart, settle on a date. And we'll tackle that after, offline. Economic Development and Tourism, I know you met on Monday.
Yep.
And Councilmember Kucharty, you want to give a report?
Yeah, we had 3 items on the agenda. We had Mayor Greg Wheeler from the city of Bremerton join us. And we were talking about the extended hours of the foot ferry service. I think they were under the impression that they would want to do maybe a little bit more than what our current budget had allotted for. So I think we had a really good discussion about that and kind of the data that drove us to make the decision that we did. I think by the end of it, we were all in agreement, and we agreed to come back this fall as we look to plan for 2021. I know there's a lot of development happening in downtown Port Orchard. Excuse me, with maybe different changes of festivals, it could alter decisions moving forward. But I think the decision was to remain with the schedule that we have today. Port Orchard is funding that to the tune of $2,500, and Brandy's going to start moving forward with some contracts. We then moved on to talk about kind of some lodging tax. There were some questions about maybe what impacts that some of the long-term rental companies, Airbnbs, the VRBOs, and maybe what percentages of LTAC that has in our community. There's some state regulations that don't allow for certain types of disclosures, so that type of information is not easily as available as we might think. But it's something that the committee will continue to look at and also make sure that these enterprises are abiding by the rules and are licensed in our city. We moved on to the city website and how we might want to upgrade our city website by having some information about economic development and tourism here in Port Orchard. Brandy had 3 or 4 different examples from some of our neighboring jurisdictions, and some great ideas, and we're going to try to parlay this with the communications person that we're looking to onboard with the city and look for their expertise to help kind of take a look at what that presence could look like on our website and some of our outbound messaging. So that is that, and our next meeting is scheduled for the first Monday of April.
Okay, and I believe Transportation met, thank you for your report, met 2 weeks ago. And you gave a report, I believe, at that meeting. And your next meeting is scheduled for March 24th. Has utilities met, or,
No, we're meeting this next Monday, 9:30 a.m. here at City Hall.
okay? And I see sewer advisory, did you meet?
No, and that's Well, we met a while ago, yes,
Okay, but May 27th, I see, is the next
correct.
meeting. Land use, have you
So-
met
We met, we had
last week?
yeah, it was our first meeting in some time. We met on March 3rd. We had several items that we talked about. The first item was a request by the mayor that 3 on-street parking spaces on the south side of Geiger Road, so right over here, be reserved 24/7 for parking of city vehicles, and that would free up 3 parking spaces, employee parking spaces, in the employee parking lot. A little more discussion to be had on that because it was pointed out that one of the affected employees has got a ADA parking pass, parking placard.
resolved that.
So we
Yep.
have resolved that, okay. So I guess that's coming to work study
We're gonna
next.
bring it to, probably to a work study or potentially straight to a council meeting, and
Okay,
is there a desire to see that at a work study, or would you? So what's happening is we've got 3 city vehicles over here in the gravel lot, and we have 8 roughly employees doing the 4-hour shuffle. And so if we designate these city vehicles similar to what Bremerton has done over in front of their city hall, over here on the side of the building, that will allow us to take 3 employees off the street and put them into the parking over there. And then the accommodation for the employee, we're just gonna designate one of the parking stalls behind the DCD building for that employee. So
okay.
is there desire to have a deeper dive into this at a work study? Or are we comfortable with us designating some stalls?
I'm comfortable bringing it to the council.
Back to the full council? Okay. So if we can, we'll talk about, if Mr. Dorsey makes it to work tomorrow, we'll talk about him drafting that ordinance.
Okay. So the next item involves a request by 817 Sydney Avenue, which is a law office. They had requested that parking in front of their building be changed from all-day parking to 1 or 2-hour time limit parking. This is south of Ada Street. This law office has a parking lot on both sides of its building, so it's adequately parked. But they felt that people were abusing the privilege of parking in front of their law offices. Ferry commuters, Kitsap County employees, and courthouse jurors and attendees. The committee declined to honor that request, feeling like that parking was just like any other parking along the road there. The next item was a discussion, and I think the mayor may have mentioned at a work study that the county is looking to possibly dispose of Veterans Memorial Park. That is a 48-acre park, yes, a 48-acre park, which is 10 times all of our parks combined. And so the city is looking at whether it makes sense to acquire that property. But before we consider this much further, we're going to ask that we understand what sort of deferred maintenance issues there are, what sort of maintenance obligations we would have in the future, what sort of community interest is there. This sets the wheels rolling for a parks department, essentially, or could very well do that. So we also asked for a property appraisal and risk assessment. So there's a lot more to come on that, and the council will be briefed in a work study when that's right.
Thank you for your report. I see on our agenda here too, we have the Transportation Committee listed a second time. So we might want to correct that for future agendas, unless they want to give 2 reports.
We also talked about church encampment, House Bill 1754, which I think, and Nick will correct me if I get this wrong, would have allowed for churches to house homelessness encampments where they have all the adequate parking in place for their regular operations. So ideally, it would have targeted some of the larger religious organizations that could have done safe parks, for example. The question before the committee is whether we wanted to do anything to try and address that in advance of the legislative session ending, and there wasn't enough time. And I don't know if that bill is going to make it or made it.
I'm not-
And I think we discussed that might impact in the city only a couple organizations that have adequate space for safe parks. The next item was a longer discussion of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment docket, and so we talked about that tonight. Nothing was amiss from what we talked about. The next item was a revision to design standards made by McCormick Communities and Quadrant Homes. They really wanted to improve a product that they were trying to develop, and so they had asked for modification or considerations for modifications to code that would have addressed, and I'm going to read this. Elevation requirements for detached houses on sloping lots or lots below adjacent right-of-way. Location of primary access to a detached house. To allow carriage units or detached units in cottage court developments, and requirements for front porches were also addressed. This was a set of draft revisions that was also reviewed favorably by the Planning Commission in February. And they're looking to review an ordinance and take a vote on that at the April Planning Commission meeting. The next agenda item was a potential annexation called the Cook Road annexation. That involves a request by the owner of the property at 1405 Southwest Cook Road, which is located between the South Kitsap Industrial Park and SR 16. They have indicated some interest in perhaps being annexed by the city or to the city. This is a site that has been recently developed under county permitting for commercial shell-type buildings. And they're looking at annexation to allow city water on site. And then the next agenda item was something that Councilmember Chang had asked to talk about, which is the status of Housing Kitsap's Sherman Ridge project, which is a 27-lot subdivision, and where they were with that, and what's going on just generally with Housing Kitsap projects, future projects in Kitsap County. It was pointed out by Nick that they are about to submit permits. They've been revising their designs to comply with the city design standards, and so that can be quite daunting. And then we also observed that the cost of land has gone up in Kitsap, so that they're looking to site their projects elsewhere. We also talked about fireworks sales, and this will likely come back to the council as a work study item, but fireworks sales have been grandfathered throughout the city, and so it was discussed that fireworks sales should be issued to permit holders outside of the commercial heavy zone, which is where they're permitted outright. And a number of spots currently are not cited in the commercial heavy zone, and so that we would allow those fireworks sales this year, but that in 2021 permits will only be issued for fireworks sales that are located in this commercial heavy zone. So that is something that I'm sure we'll hear more about. And then there was a couple other additional items that we deferred. One was a request by the gentleman who was at our last meeting to talk about homelessness and parking in front of 4-hour daytime parking spots by Capital Christian Church. And so we did not entertain that discussion, but I'm sure we will. And then we also talked a little bit about the Cheers building variance and why the need for the variance and what that looked like. And that was it. Any questions?
You guys handled a lot at that meeting.
It was a busy meeting, yeah.
Mayor, if I could have a quick go back, I think I rephrased our next meeting date for EDC incorrectly. It's the second Monday of the month, not the first Monday of April.
So then our next meeting is April 6th at 9:30 at DCD.
Thank you for your report. Lodging tax, looks like
October.
you're gonna meet in October. I'm glad you got that on the calendar. No date in particular, but the month of October.
Just keep pushing it out.
All right. Chimes and lights?
Next Monday, 3:30 p.m. here at City Hall.
Wonderful. Outside agency, and I apologize, this information, probably the most important meeting I had last week was the health board. When we divvied up responsibilities last year, you usually get one or two of the mayors and the county commissioners, one or two agencies that you need to be the chair of, and I took one of the tough ones in Housing Kitsap, and then I raised my hand for what I thought was going to be one of the easy ones, the Public Health Board. So, with that said, So this information was last week, and I took my notes, and it's already dated. And, you know, obviously, as the city, we're taking our direction from public health, sharing, and I'm putting information. The best way you can get current information is to go on to the public health's website and sign up for their releases. They're sending those out daily. And I'm getting them, and I tend to forget to share them with everybody. And if it's really important, we put it on our webpage and on our Facebook. So as we've continued to hear that senior facilities and the homeless are the most vulnerable to this virus. We're looking at our leave policy. I know Spokane Valley has already passed an ordinance or resolution to address that. We're going to bring something back about our ability to conduct meetings electronically, which we tested at next week's work study, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity. We've been having a number of conversations internally, and John Clausen and I have been having some conversations too, and debate. I'm not certain that I have the authority to close City Hall, matter of fact, when we look at our codes. So we're Code City, and probably something that things like snowstorms, I tend to look at what the county closes much more frequently than I do. When they close, I start to think about whether it makes sense for us, is kind of my thought process. It's expensive to close this place for the day. And when we had 3 feet of snow on the ground, there was a couple days last year that we closed, and there could be something that the governor causes or enacts things, but we might have things going on here in Kitsap County, and because Kitsap County does something doesn't mean I necessarily have the authority. So we need to have some discussion on what that looks like. So we'll bring that back next week.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, though, I think it's important that, at least in my research, we, the council, sets the city hall hours, but we can delegate that authority to the mayor. It's just that the discussion that we had today is to look back in the history. Has the council ever delegated that authority to the mayor? Because if we haven't, then he doesn't have the authority. If we have, then it's a moot issue. But it's something that we could deal with.
We haven't found it yet.
Okay.
And
More to come.
More to come, and I wouldn't be the only mayor that's closed City Hall in the last 20 years, I can assure you. But it should be in our code, and we need to address that. Last week we were briefed that the task the health board was trying to accomplish, and actually what we're trying to do as a nation, is to keep this virus out of our country. We weren't successful, and us as a county, and proportionately on our population is how our local health district is funded. That effort up to February 25th to track people. So if someone came from China and they cleared customs and they didn't have symptoms and they weren't quarantined, they were told their information was gathered, sent to your local health district, and these people were encouraged to self-quarantine. There was no requirement, and if something arose, so we were tracking all these people as the contacts were given to our local health district. That effort that lasted a little over a month we used 725 man hours and $53,000, and it wasn't successful. Whatever this next few months entails, it's going to be a lot more expensive than that, I can assure you. And our challenge also is there are other funding sources that are grant driven that the public health nurses and things do. They get state and federal grant money. Well, this effort is so now we're doing this other work we're expending money, and we're not doing work that is important but not crucial. This is a crisis we're dealing with over here, so we're not doing the work that's going to get us our normal paycheck. So it's gonna compound this funding problem. So we're hearing at the federal level that there's help coming. There's also potentially at the state level some funding coming. But in the meantime, we still have to pay the bills over there. So I won't be surprised, you know, if we're asked, you know, to help out, for our proportional share of this, and it's what we've got to do. And I've assured the director, we trust you, go do the work, and we'll figure this other piece out. So, Mr. Clausen?
Well, it raises a very interesting point, and although there's no guarantees at this point, this would be a good exercise for us to track our additional expenses. Because if it is ever declared to be an emergency by the president, then our documented expenses have an opportunity to get reimbursed from FEMA and whomever. So we should be tracking not only our obligation to the health district, but anything that we're doing that is specifically related to dealing with this particular.
I believe for us, and we don't have anything to this point, other than my time attending meetings, which I do anyway.
Right.
I believe, and much like the tornado, we would need to pass an emergency declaration to be probably eligible for that type of
Well,
funding.
my understanding, and I'm not the authority, but my understanding is there's a hierarchy to this, and
Yeah.
when the president declares an emergency, that opens up the federal checkbook for us to be reimbursed. So there are smarter people than I that can understand that, but
And Bainbridge Island and the county have enacted emergency ordinances, declarations at this point, and it's more for procurement and purchasing, so that they don't have to follow you know, like King County, an example, King County buying a hotel to put homeless individuals in that are affected. So I don't, Mayor Erickson and I talked
confirm it.
about, yeah.
please,
Yeah.
I would just confirm it, because if nothing else, it's a good exercise for us to be able to set up a system to track it.
Yes. And when we had the tornado, what we found out too, though, with these federal there's a threshold, and it's pretty high. On the tornado, we expended a lot of money, and we were far below the threshold.
That was a fairly isolated case, but when you're talking about something like what we're dealing with now that is a county-wide, ours gets added to the city of Bremerton, the city of Paulsville, and so on, and it finally reaches that total threshold to where it then is eligible. So you don't have to be by yourself reach that threshold, but it's a total amount for the community that's affected.
All right, we'll continue to look into that. So the other points that were made, which I think we've heard repeatedly, to continually wash your hands frequently, avoid touching your eyes and mouth, cover your cough, stay away from people who are sick, and when you're sick, stay home. And it's, you know, we've got a number of people with colds around City Hall, and Mr. Dorsey and Chief Brown have been staying home the last few days, so that, you know, it's highly unlikely they have the coronavirus, but we're being very careful and wiping things down continually around here, around City Hall. So I just wanted to share that from the outside agency standpoint. That was probably the biggest outside agency, was that we didn't have a KRCC.
Not this month, no.
And we did have transit, and we had Kitsap 911, but I don't, nothing on the scale of what we were doing at the health board. So I'll move on to the mayor's report. The community, because of the coronavirus, the church has reached out to me, and they want to scale back the community service day. I posted something about that today. We've taken about half the projects out. The two Rotary clubs still want to do one wants to do something at Turner Park and down at West Bay. The other wants to do something at the roundabout. And then the church will do playground chips at Clayton Park, and they'll do some maintenance work out at McCormick Village Park. But we're really,
That again?
it is the 21st and 9 o'clock. If you showed up at 9 o'clock somewhere with your work gloves and wanted to help out. So I think we can still make this as a success, but historically this is the 5th year. The last few years we've had 300 volunteers that we've mobilized and gotten more work done than our public works could ever get done in an entire summer, and it's fabulous. But I think we need to be responsible, you know, in doing this, I guess, on a smaller scale. And so I attended the Port of Bremerton meeting this morning, and I briefed them on a number of projects we have, and in particular things like our marina pump station that are coming in the future, and the pathway, and other projects that impact port properties. They were very appreciative that I came out and spoke with them. I was very well received. Safe Facebook stats. Got them here somewhere. So we currently have 2,231 followers. Our most recent large groups of people reached the police giving tree, in December, reached 12,239. The Festival of Chimes and Lights tree contest, 8,600. Bring your own bag fact sheet. That reached 5,300 people. And when the state closed the crosswalk at Rockwell, that was 4,900. The police department recognitions that we just did here 2 weeks ago, 4,674. We posted an accounting 2 position that we hired. We had a number of qualified applicants. We reached 3,783 people. And just on Monday, our newest police officer joined us from the academy, and that post reached 3,482 people. So I was at Rotary today, and one of the realtors there shared this is Kitsap County as a whole, real estate statistics, and there in February there were 116 new listings. Over the prior February, that's a 78.5% increase over the prior year. But active listings only stand at 95 compared to 146 the year before. So we have a record number of new listings, yet we're 35% down on active listing. That's how fast the real estate is moving as soon as it goes on the market. The realtor said, "It's a bad time to be a home buyer," was his comment. The median price year over year has gone up 13.3% in Kitsap County to from $350 to $396. So just wanted to share that. Update to a personnel policy. I'm obligated to bring you changes to the personnel policy, not for you to vote on, but just to make you aware. And we have a safety committee and expanded the scope of the safety committee. Public Works had one representative, and I've expanded that so that engineering has a representative, self-elected from their body, and the Public Works shop has a body, because their roles are a little different and their safety needs are a little different. So, and then I also now have a management representative on the safety committee, which I've appointed Noah Crocker to be management's representative. I saw today that the legislature passed a statewide single bag ban, and we were ahead of them, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Was it markedly different in any way from?
I haven't seen the bill language
Heard
yet.
that the dollar, or the price per bag is the same as what we
Well, that was the important piece that we
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah, so.
They learned from us, is what I would prefer to think.
That's right. My next item was the navigator position, which I grabbed an opportunity since the fire chief and one of his board members was here, and I already talked about that. I don't know if you saw the, in McCormick East by the fire station 17 there on the backside on Glenwood Road, we've got notice of that logging activity, and I don't know if it's started yet or not, but that was purposeful, just trying to message and get information out ahead of activity happening.
That was well done.
So thank you, and thank you to Nick and Charlotte for their help with that. Nick told me that Dutch Brothers picked up their permit. I don't know, when they're gonna start knocking down houses there? Any day, all right, can't wait. And we've advertised our new building inspector position this week, and I'll be bringing a resolution within the next few council meetings to temporarily increase the FTE count. John's on light duty. Our volume right now is tremendous. We need to get somebody in, get them trained, have some overlap. And then we'll we'll bring back in the budget process after we have somebody hired, where we're at with John, whether it warrants it to continue, having 2 inspectors for a period of time. John can do plan reviews, but he's not very mobile right now. He's got a back injury. And so it's just an opportunity for us to use our contracted inspector less and have some overlap. And we talked about this at the retreat, and shouldn't be a surprise to you guys. I've got a contract sitting on my desk for the salary survey and strategic workforce study. The $20,000 in the budget will cover the salary survey component. I don't need a budget amendment. We have sufficient savings in a number of other areas in human resources. The additional body of work for the strategic workforce assessment is $10,000 with the same consultant. I just want to make you aware of it. Administratively, I can sign the contract. I'm going to do that probably tomorrow or the next day. And so that body of work is underway, and we won't need any additional budget authority to complete the work. So because we save quite a bit of money on the police chief's recruitment in that process. So,
Are you able to recall who our comparables will be for the salary survey?
When we get the consultant hired, we have historically, for the non-represented, it's been Kitsap County and the cities to Gig Harbor, basically this side of the bridge, Paul, Spokane, Bridge Island have been our, core comparables. The union contracts are a little different. We go a farther reach than that, but we have, at least historically, anybody in any of the government entity, the county. I mean, one of our engineers could go easily to the county. Ian was trying to compare us to Bellevue, and I wasn't buying it.
Well, but I think there might be a point made that maybe we should compare Tacoma, for example.
Yeah, we've used this side of the Narrows Bridge
Yeah.
to date, so
All right.
it'll drive the numbers up if we cross the Narrows Bridge or cross the Sound.
Yeah.
I did have a hard time with Tacoma.
Well, I just know that there's a lot of talent that heads that way because they do pay.
Yeah, they do, and so does King County is.
I was
Yeah,
going to say,
exactly.
and I'm not questioning what we do this time, but in the future, when that fast ferry gets, particularly out of Southworth and from here, we may need to expand our reach a little bit.
Fortunately, the ferries don't go to Bellevue, but maybe Seattle.
Correct. Or West Seattle, right.
Or West Seattle, yeah. So it could be a very valid point in the future, but I don't, at least at this point, I'm gonna, Noah and I will sit down with that consultant and we will, if we're gonna expand the scope of that and the range, we'll be back talking to you. I don't plan to unless the consultant makes a very compelling case, which then we could be sitting out here at a work study session with that consultant and discussing why they think that's relevant. But I'm not eager to do that. That's all I have for my report. I have the chief
Mr.
and,
Mayor?
yes.
Just a quick question. How come your camera isn't on?
No, I did that on purpose. Would you like my camera back on?
Not particularly, I was just questioning why.
Where are you? There you are.
So in the 3 little dots, you can click and stop my video, and then it puts your name versus my mug. And I was just, I don't know if you've had dinner or not. I was just trying to not make you ill.
I don't really care, I'm just curious as to if there was a reason for that.
All right, let's. We got 2 people online. Let me. I see Noah's absent, so he's online, but he's not sitting in front of his. Oh, there he is.
He's
Okay,
listening.
Noah, what are you? And you're muted though.
Is that your shower curtain?
Are you in the bathroom?
Muted.
He's muted.
Actually, the only thing I want to talk with is that we want to schedule the finance committee for March 17th.
do you want to do that right now on the, whoa. Turn that back down. We've been historically doing that before a council meeting.
The 24th won't work because we have the transportation committee meeting before that council meeting, so that's why I'm targeting the 17th.
Somebody needs to have the volume up, not all of us, but it's hard to hear.
St. Patty's Day.
He's lobbying for the 17th, but I'm gone.
Okay.
Not to say someone couldn't step in. I could do the 24th.
The transportation committee meets that night, and there's another council member that's on that committee.
Whoops, too much.
And how about all the way to April 14th? Would that work?
Fine with me.
Works for me, but is that too far down the road?
Too far out.
April 14th, too far, Noah?
Talk about some financing options.
What time?
Typical time.
5:30.
5:30, is that what you usually do?
5:30, Noah? Okay, 5:30.
Can you guys hear Noah through your devices, or is it coming from mine only?
I'm hearing a lot of echoing,
Have
so
the-
I don't know, nobody has it
Have the
up loud
volume way
enough.
down.
Yeah, I have my devices, I'm hearing them.
We're too close together. If we're in different rooms, you can have it as loud as
One
you want.
person should have volume up and the rest of us turn it down so we can hear, but what I heard was April 14th at 5:30, is
Yep.
it?
Yep. So I apologize for the feedback.
Beck, does that work for you?
It does.
Okay. Okay, anything else, Noah? Okay,
One thing for Noah, just, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, but the last 3 or 4 years, we've lived some pretty swell economic times, and what's happening right now, let's not let us lose sight of what's happening in the local economy and how it could impact the city, and just be prepared for it. You know, we've been seeing a lot of record revenue years, and this could be a game changer, so let's just all be cognizant of essential versus non-essential and keep an eye on revenues.
yep, we've been having those very conversations already. So, but very good point. Okay, thank you, Noah. Chief Brown, you still there?
He is.
And he dressed up.
You- Okay, you missed the police department here. Or the fire department, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for your report. Okay, Nick, you can talk to us versus your phone.
Well, I was going to announce about Dutch Brothers and the logging activities you mentioned, but we have been issuing a lot of permits, so I think you're going to see things starting up as we're heading into spring. Notably among them are McCormick North. I believe they're doing the clearing limits inspections right now, and they're going to start clearing off of Figley Road here soon. And Kaiser Permanente is starting, they had their pre-con meeting today to talk about the MRI mobile unit that they will be bringing in a few days a week or as needed to do some imaging work. So that's also moving forward. And there's been a handful of other projects, but just a whole lot of activity in our department.
Questions?
How's Stetson Heights coming?
Well, it hasn't been raining, so I haven't been hearing a whole lot, but I do know that they submitted for their off-site improvements, and we are trying to get to that as quickly as we can. We're really backed up on plan review, I think, in engineering right now, and so that's in the queue to review their off-site improvements to extend their sewer lines and water lines, as well as their on-site improvements. And so they actually changed engineers recently, and so the new engineer who is working on this is getting up to speed and working on getting things across the finish line.
Thank you.
And anybody wishes to, our exercise is done, so if you want to X out, you can.
Okay, so you stop it.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the meeting.
And then I'm going to leave the meeting, everybody.
That we can not maybe have so much feedback. Thanks for participating in an experiment to see.
That worked well.
So make sure we could do it. it was easy. The biggest thing it was easy to do.
So if we need to employ this, will we just be getting an email that
In
says?
an email,
Okay.
yeah. And you know, obviously will be, some emergency action is gonna,
Right.
you know, be ahead of that, that says we can't come together to meet. And I think we're gonna be very careful about what we put on the agenda, just to handle necessary business. Because all Brandy's gonna be able to do is to put a tape recorder up next to her computer. There is a chat function in that. I asked that we not use that, because we can't, capture those records, so, just, you gotta be careful how we, you know, it's a tool, but, we're still learning, and you know, as we develop different technology for this space in the future, I think this is the type of stuff that, you know, so that it's on the screen over there, and the sound's coming out of there, and, you know, so, you know, I'm not envisioning this at all, that somebody's gone on vacation, or you're out sick, and you're calling in, because that's what, well, we need 4 of us here. This is really something that's truly an extraordinary event, and we need to conduct business, and just trying to put a tool in place. So, yes.
2 real quick comments. One of the challenges that I found with this is I do an electronic agenda, and it's
Yes.
really tough to look at an agenda and your face at the
Yes.
same time. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we're,
that's
On
one
the
issue.
surfaces, you can have side-by-side screens though, so you can do that. You can.
and I can assure you, we're not gonna put 10 items on an agenda or
Well,
something complex. It's
That was
gonna-
my second comment, and I'm not the authority, but we're doing the same thing, and in what I've discovered so far, and I would defer to the attorney and the clerk, that when you do declare these emergency meetings, there's statements that have to be made at the beginning of the meeting as to the reason that you're having this, so that it's recorded. So if we ever have to do that, let's make sure that we include that. I'm sure you will.
More to come.
Yeah.
We've got this on the work study next week. This was just me trying the toy, making sure we had the right tool. And I think we do. I mean, for ease of use, there's a number of tools out there.
Yeah,
Matter of
no,
fact,
the
we have-
the tool is fine. It's just that I want to make sure that
Yeah, we
under
covered
the Open
base.
Meetings Act, to be able to have an emergency meeting where the public isn't here or have access to us, there has to be certain things said, so.
Yep, we completely agree. So, Charlotte?
Nothing to report this evening.
Okay. But you know you've got a number of things to work on between now and the work study.
Absolutely.
You're-
Well,
You're hearing,
yes, I would say the majority of my clients have declared emergencies, so I've been through it a few times. We can walk through it together. So.
wonderful. Brandy?
I have nothing to report either.
Okay, for the good of the order.
Last 2 weeks, I've been working up at elections, and if you have never been there or observed it, I will tell you, it is truly amazing how well they protect each citizen's information and rights. And if you want to go sometimes during the election period, I strongly recommend it. It's been an eye-opener, and the people that work there really take pride in their work and treat it as a civic duty. And so very, very impressed. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Others? Have anything for the good of the order? Okay, we stand adjourned. We'll see you next week at the work study, I hope.